Welcome to today's episode. Today we'll be talking about guarding the gates and dealing with the top cybersecurity challenges that organizations face. Today I'm joined by Elizabeth. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi.
We'll be discussing what are these top security challenges that organizations face, and not only what they face, but also how do they actually deal with them. So it'll be very interesting to see as to what wealth of experience that Elizabeth has gathered, considering that she deals with our customers on a day-to-day basis. And I'm sure they've shared some very interesting feedback in regards to their challenges. So with that in mind, let's get started. So what are some of these most common cybersecurity threats that organizations face today, Beth?
Yeah, I talk to a lot of customers, prospects. People are coming to me as the first point of contact when it comes to things like cybersecurity.
Right.
And I think, to be honest, like the most common misconception about cyber threats is people think that it's just a random person behind a computer, saying, which company am I going to target today? In most cases, the real threats now are real organizations that are forming, that are really spraying the internet, looking for open doors, looking for vulnerable organizations. And that can come in any shape, size, industry. So they don't really discriminate against what a company does. In general, they're just looking for an open door.
Right.
And if you think about evolving threats over time, if you take a step back and look at organizations, we are relying more and more on technology. Technology is evolving. And with that, obviously, the criminals are seeing more potential, more things that they can use to infiltrate. And in general, I think if you talk about maybe small, medium-sized organizations, they really need to take a step back and think about, okay, what is the real risk of our specific organization? I talked to a company last year who work in supply chain with fruit, and fruit has such a short shelf life, and that's their main products, right? So for them, if they have any kind of downtime, even for a day, their product therefore is unsellable because the fruit goes bad. Then they can't deliver, and their biggest customer, which takes up 80% of their business, is a big supermarket chain. So if they can't deliver and then they lose that customer, then there's no product, there's no customer, business goes down. So they really need to, every organization needs to take a step back and think about what is the real risk to my organization, and then they can make steps into really seeing what the threat is and how they can mitigate all of those risks. That's what I see today.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you point out, organizations actually, potentially ending up to not existing any longer as a consequence of cybersecurity damages, because I think a lot of organization thinks that okay, well, it's just going to be maybe a downtime a little bit, maybe I'm going to have some minor IT issues, but actually in certain cases some organizations end up going out of business. So I mean it's quite serious, and people should take this serious. Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to really go into talking a little bit more about, so now that we know they obviously have issues, how do they implement adequate measures to make sure that they don't become attacked?
Yeah, big question, right? Where do you start? That's always the first step. If you don't know, first of all, where you stand today, it's hard to know where you want to be. The market is totally saturated now with so many different cybersecurity tools, and what do they really do? What do we really need? It's big challenge. Where do you start? And I think you see a lot of companies get lost in the data because of all of these different tools. They spit out all different kinds of data. And if you're not used to these kind of tools or knowing what this data really means to your organization, then you spend a lot of time analyzing, and maybe you have a waste of investment. And that's the last thing you don't want, because cybersecurity budgets are already so limited. So you really want to use the best investment for your money. And I think what you see is there's always this balance between the cheaper cybersecurity tools, or maybe open source tools that are free, but they take up a lot of time to use, and yeah, you need to know exactly how to manage this kind of data. What is
Right.
it really telling you? Or you have the more complicated enterprise level tools. Take a lot of knowledge to know what is really how to use it in the best way, and most companies don't really have enterprise level knowledge anyway, or resources. So you really have to find the balance for your own organization. So my advice is not to get lost in the data and really try to understand what your organization needs. And yeah, I think the key in these kind of areas on how to mitigate these kind of challenges is to have a tool that is set up properly, set up well, has kind of key with things like automation, does a lot of the, let's say automated analysis for you, so that you don't have to get lost in all the data and really understands what it says to you. That's probably my advice today.
Yeah, no, and I think just to add on to that, I mean, there's no doubt that a tool that can help you to prioritize as well, right? Because as we see, a lot of times when you then start to dig into it, it's not like you have one challenge to deal with. You also need to know where do you focus, right? I mean, there's so many different things that you can do. So make sure that you focus on the most critical ones.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be spending your precious time analyzing all of this information that you spending all your time on that. You want to be putting your resources best where they are, and that's obviously prioritizing the most critical areas for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's definitely a good point to add.
Yeah. So I think that leads on very well to the next question I have, which is, what are some of those most critical vulnerabilities that organizations deal with?
Yeah, obviously we work in the field of vulnerability management, so a lot of my time is spent looking at vulnerabilities, new vulnerabilities every day, like overwhelmed with new information, things that you have to look at. While obviously IT teams in general have to just manage day-to-day normal operations. But there's a difference between knowing what a real vulnerability is and knowing what a vulnerability is a real risk to your organization. If you take a definition of what is a vulnerability, it's an open door, it's a weakness, something that maybe you can use to move further in an organization. But a vulnerability that actually is proposing risk could be something actually exploitable, and an exploit is a script that can be run that can actually exploit the vulnerability where a hacker can move further. So there's a difference between looking at a house, seeing that the window is open on the top floor, okay, that's vulnerability, compared to the difference that, okay, but I've left my ladder outside in my garden, so an actual hacker could use the ladder to climb through my upstairs open window. So there's a difference between knowing your own estate, what is a real risk or not. So it's very easy for me to say, okay, there's a new exploitable vulnerability out in the wilds, you should check this, because might not always be a risk to your own estate. So I think that you hear all the time about vulnerabilities with common vendors like Microsoft or Barracuda or whatever you're using today. But you don't want to just be focusing on the reds, because it's not just one vulnerability that hackers are using to exploit. It's often a chain of attack, right? So what I hear is that a lot of companies focus on just the most critical vulnerabilities, but the truth is that they're also using, for example, the medium level ones to move laterally. So you can't really ignore everything, but you do need to be able to understand, according to your own estate, what is the real risk and how can we mitigate that, today with our resources. So that's what I see in the industry today.
No, really. So when you look at vulnerabilities, you need to put it in context of your organization, right? So that even if it is that you have a system that is medium or even potentially low risk, if it holds critical information, let's say such as your customer data or something, even if it is medium at risk, it is still a high priority because, if somebody gets there, then that's where you are potentially most vulnerable, right? So if they encrypt your data or steal your data and so on. So, yeah.
And let me ask you, wouldn't you rather know your vulnerabilities before a hacker does? I mean, that's obviously visibility is key, first step, right? So
absolutely. Yeah, if you don't know, how can you deal with? Simply. Which I think leads us on to another interesting area, which is that obviously we have a lot of technical assets in an organization, but let's not forget the employees or the human side of it. So, what would you, in your opinion, be what you should be doing in regards to making sure the employees are as, a strong defense against cyber criminals as your technical assets are?
Yeah, it's a bit cheesy to say, and you hear it all the time, but they are in a way your first line of defense. I mean, your technical assets, typically you have traditionally obviously your firewalls and your antivirus or whatever it is, but the users can in some cases open doors, and I often see two levels of threats towards employees. You've got more the first level, which is you see attackers all the time where a new employee joins an organization and they instantly get a email from the CEO or proposed CEO, hey, I need you to buy me some vouchers real quick because I'm with a client, and can you please quickly just buy some and send me the code so I can give it to the customer, and they really put you in a haste to trick you.
Yeah.
So, okay, maybe not critical to the business, but still a threat that's happening out there where they're targeting new users. Maybe they have some automated script or something. And the other one is maybe a more sophisticated attack where they really have the motivation to get into the IT estate so that they can reach the more critical area of the organization, whether it be sensitive data or critical systems, whatever it is to the organization.
Yeah.
And really, I think it comes down to culture of an organization as well, starting from top down, because today everyone is responsible for protecting the organization, whether it be sensitive information or access to systems, credentials. Everyone is now responsible for that. And I think that it comes from the top down, from management. If management are promoting that everyone is responsible. Awareness programs, of course, is something that can be done and implemented very easily. What we see is that awareness typically lasts around, let's say, 3 months, meaning that you do need to continuously keep people aware of the risks that are out there. Phishing attacks, smishing, impersonation, potential ransomware, malware links, for example.
Right.
So yeah, and my recommendation is to maybe look at the responsibility versus risk for specific individuals, specific departments of an organization, departments that might have access to sensitive information or admin level credentials. These are maybe people with higher risk, so probably you need to be training them more, making them more aware of their responsibility.
Right.
And I really hope that organizations take more of a positive connotations when it comes to things like awareness training, instead of saying like, okay, you did something wrong, you clicked on a phishing link that was a simulation. I think it should be more positive impacts, like, okay, we are together, we need to be protecting the organization.
Right.
That's what I see today as something that should be adopted more within organizations.
Yeah, no. So, I think you touched upon the aspect of being proactive about it or regularly training, because I do think it is quite critical that not only is it related to forgetfulness or lack of routines or whatever else, but it's also the fact that it evolves all the time, right? So even what you know today, cyber criminals gets more fancy or sophisticated, find new ways, and you need to know about that, right? Because even if, as you say, you've got all the greatest training and you're following the rules, what if the rules change, the game changes, then you need to be aware of the new rules.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree totally.
Yeah, yeah. Which I think brings us on to the last point that I had, which is related to both the human element, but also the technical element, which is that we used to be confined inside our own organization walls or IT walls, if you like, but now organizations have adopted cloud infrastructure, and as well as the employees are not just sitting in an office, but are moving around and working remotely. So what kind of challenges did organizations face when it comes to both cloud and remote workforce?
You know, pre-COVID, of course, people were still moving with digital transformation into the cloud. We only saw it accelerate, obviously, through COVID as we transformed to more remote working
Mm,
ways of working. So digital transformation is ongoing topic. It's not slowing down, and
right.
it's only just going to be more and more relevant.
Mm,
And it is a more efficient way of working, more cost effective, whatever suits you best. But there
mm,
are obviously a lot of companies with employees with, maybe bring your own devices, and that's quite hard to have visibility on.
right.
Having a remote workforce, bringing your own device, then you have to provide hardware, you don't have a VPN. So, there's a lot of challenges within cloud computing and remote
Mm,
workforce.
mm,
It's hard to say like one plan fits all
right.
because every organization is set up differently. They're in different stages of their maturity of cybersecurity, maybe different kinds of policies. But um, I always take a step back and refer to frameworks like the CIS
Mm,
benchmarks. And I think that's something that small, medium-sized organizations can adopt because it gives them a bit of understanding about where they stand today. Do they have things like MFA? These are kind of the foundations. MFA, do they
mm,
understand which users have access to which kinds of data, what applications are used, the
right.
environment, things like asset inventories. These are really kind of the foundations, um, the start of the cyber defense. So building layers on top of that when it comes to cybersecurity
Mm,
is going to be something that is going to be more efficient when you're building on top of your cyber roadmap, because digital transformation means that things are continuously changing.
yeah.
So you do need to be on top of it. And technology is evolving, your business will grow, it will rely more on technology, technologies will change within the business, things will grow with scale, more users will join the company, that means more laptops, more endpoints. So it's really a continuous process, and
Mm,
it's something that you should be constantly analyzing. Where do we stand? Where do we want to be?
right.
So I'm always referring to things like sys controls because people always ask me, okay, we don't know where to start, and so I think that's something I always recommend
Mm,
to look to. So it's of course challenging, but that's always what I recommend when it comes to things like securing data and systems. Like, first figure out where you stand and what is like a logical next step.
right.
Is it to include things like MFA? Is it to add things like socks or seams? Typically, that's something a lot later, a lot more mature. Is it to
Mm,
do continuous vulnerability management next? So
yeah.
it's something that I always refer to
Mm,
when I try to understand what an organization really needs at this point in time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's important point you brought out, which is that some organizations use cybersecurity measures as a once a year or maybe once every 5 years kind of test. Okay, let me just double check, am I fine now? And you click compliance sheets and whatever else, and you go
Yeah.
on. But the fact that it constantly evolves and new devices gets added to the network, or et cetera, it means that this is an ongoing process. I mean, it never stops, and you shouldn't stop by just saying tick a box and think you're good, because again, cyber criminals become more sophisticated, systems change, and all the things that you said. So I think it is an important point that organizations should not look at this as a one-time tick the box challenge, but an ongoing, ever-changing challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Very good. Well, thanks so much, Beth, for joining today. I think this has been very informative. For anyone that has been watching this video, if you like the video, please like or share the video. But at the same time, if you do want to have more specific topics that is related to your organization, we'll be more than happy to take in those suggestions and bring those topics to future videos. So please like the channels and watch out for future coming videos. So thanks again, Beth, for joining, and thank you to everybody watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.